stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. At the recent 2017 Stormwater Queensland and IECA conference, Alan Hoban presented a paper that highlighted how some recent research into bioretention systems was presenting a very different view of how they functioned, and specifically how much water disappears within bioretention systems, to what the music model says should happen. Now, this is really important for our industry for a few reasons. The first is, of course, the fact that there are lots of bioretention systems being built around Australia, and when it comes to figuring out how well they perform and whether they make sense to put them in, music is the tool that by and large, in the vast majority of cases, gets used. So if we've got some research coming out that shows that bioretention systems behave quite differently to what music says they should, then we've got something that we need to consider here. But it's more than that. So it's not just about a story of, hey, the research is showing that it's a little bit different to what's happening in music. Because this research, if it's pointing where it looks like it is, fundamentally changes our understanding of how bioretention systems work. It's not just a case of, hey, music didn't quite have the numbers right, let's go and adjust it, make it better and get on with life. This is actually a case of, wait, something really different's going on. And if that is going on, what we thought we knew about how bioretention systems remove pollution and deal with stormwater volumes, it's not quite what we thought it is. So in this episode, I'm going to explain to you what's going on there, and I'm going to try and do a couple of really overly simplified mass balances to demonstrate why this research is a bit of a game changer. Okay, so what's the case? You might have noticed, if you've ever modeled a bioretention system in music, that you go through it, you set up your catchment, stick your bioretention system in, and then you get that little screen with the outputs that show the percentage reductions in the pollutants, because we're always focused on, you know, TSS, TP, TN, because that's what our objectives are written for. And you might have seen you get reductions because you're meeting legislated targets of like 80% TSS and 60% TP, and so on and so forth. What you might have paid attention to, but might not have, because there's almost certainly never any requirements around this, is there's also a line there that talks about flow reductions. So reduction in the amount of volume coming out of the system as opposed to coming into the system. And it's really common that in the vast majority of instances, unless you're specifying some incredibly high infiltration rate in systems, like if you're specifying a sealed system, then the volume reductions that music suggests, or that music presents, are very small. A couple of percent in the annual load. Here's the thing. These papers that this recent research and that's presented in these papers that Alan presented about at the conference, it's not his research, but he has identified these and seen this pattern. And I'll put those papers at the very end of this episode and on the Ideanthro page for this episode, so you can go and look at those yourselves. What these papers show is that actually the volumetric losses of water through bioretention systems are way higher than we would expect. Like in the order of, I'm not going to be specific about this because we have different papers on different soil types, different natures of how much systems are sealed, but like in the order of 10 times higher, in the order in some instances talking like 50% losses of water coming in not insignificant storm events, not like in little like, oh, we manually dosed it, but in like real world storm events here, showing that bioretention systems are losing really large volumes of water. And what I mean by losing is a certain amount comes in and way less comes back out the under drainage pipe. Right? This is really profound, because if you're interested in mitigating some of the hydrologic effects of urbanization upon waterways, a system that gets rid of water and doesn't discharge it out the end could be really important. But here's where this gets really interesting, because it actually fundamentally changes how we think bioretention systems work. So let's, for a minute, in this first column that we've got over here, let's just look at what music and the lab studies of bioretention systems say should happen. So what they say should happen, and we're just going to make up some hypothetical numbers. We're going to start with 100 units of water and say that it has 100 units of pollution in it. Now, what happens in the typical sense here is that water and that pollution comes into the system, and it says that, look, the pollution, the P, is removed. I'm going to say that it's 50% just to make these numbers nice for us, but obviously we know different pollutants, different things happen within the filter media that mean that 50% of the pollution is either retained there or it's processed by microbes or it's taken up, but it's no longer in the water that comes out the bottom. So when the water gets down lower in the filter media and ultimately comes out the bottom of here, what we have left is nearly the same amount of water. I'm going to call it water units of 100, but music might say it was water units of 97 or something like that, but I'm keeping my numbers simple for you. And we have pollution units of 50 less, right? Here's the thing. The studies are showing that that doesn't happen, that in fact the water units coming out are far less. So let's have a think about, well, what can actually happen to that water in a bioretention system? Well, realistically, besides coming out the underdrain at the bottom, there's two things that can happen. Either it can infiltrate into the ground. It can also do that by coming out the sides, but I'm going to show it as coming out the base, just for simplicity, but it can come out the sides. Or it can evapotranspire back out the top. Now let's look at what actually, given our current understanding of this, and this 50 that gets removed in the filter media is really, really important here. Let's first up consider, okay, what if this water that we're using, that we're losing, is coming out the base? So we're going to make our target water coming out the under drainage here, water 50. So we're going to try and get rid of 50 units of water somewhere else. So we're going to start in the same situation. Water of 100, pollution of 100. We're going to have that come through the media and we're going to say, okay, with our current understanding, because the lab studies, like sealed systems, water in, water out, show only 50% coming out. So 50% is disappearing somewhere in the system here. So that means that we get through the filter media, it's done its treatment-y thing, and what we have lower down as the water's starting to hit the drainage areas at the bottom is we have water of 100 and pollution of 50. So what happens if we say, okay, well, we're going to get rid of the water, we're going to get rid of the 50 water, because we're trying to get to 50 water, we're going to get rid of the 50 water by infiltrating it. So we're going to send 50 water down to here. Because right, that should theoretically then leave us, because our target we're trying to get to is water 50, pollution 50. That's kind of where these papers suggest we should be getting to. So let's assume we do that. Here's the problem though. The water and the pollution, whether it's when they come into the system at the top, based on our best understanding this is, whether they come into the system at the top or whether it's at this point, the water is moving the pollution through. Some of the pollution gets pulled out here, but the stuff that doesn't is being moved through with the water. So if we want to take half the water into the infiltration, our best understanding should say, look, the pollution that's with it should go with it. This is how groundwater pollution works, right? So then what we have to admit is that if we want 50% of the water to go out this way, we also have to take half the pollution, which in this case is now 25 units. And what that leaves to come out the side here is water 50, pollution 25. We don't get the target that we're going to, because the target that we're going to, let's write this properly, to make our understanding of how pollution is removed up here and our understanding of what these papers say about less water coming out, we're trying to get to water 50, P50, right? But that's not what happens. If you think the water's going to infiltration, you have to lose pollution to infiltration, and you end up with too little pollution coming out the end of the system. So now let's look at the other possibility here, and the other possibility is infiltration. So let's run through it again. Water 100, pollution 100, comes into the system. 50 units of pollution get removed here. Well, okay, we could lose, oops, did that wrong, 50 units of water out the top. And evapotranspiring, it wouldn't have to take that pollution with it. So then, yeah, right, we could be left. We could be left with water 50, P50. That works. But there's still a problem. Just think about, like, it's easy for me to scratch up these hypothetical numbers of, oh, water 50 going out the top and water 50 coming down the bottom. But just think about the volume of water that comes into a bioretention system and the volume of losses that we're talking about, because these papers are talking about like losses in the order of 30, 40, 50% of not insignificant storms coming into these systems. To say, well, the solution to this is we must be evapotranspiring heaps more water. Well, sure, that's possible, but that's a lot of water. That's way more water than we would typically expect vegetation and soils in normal landscapes to evapotranspire. So what this sets us up is this situation where I think, like turning back to Sherlock Holmes as I have in previous episodes, is a situation where we've got, look, we know things aren't quite adding up here. By the way, the Sherlock Holmes quote that makes sense here is, when you've eliminated all the sensible things, I'm paraphrasing, when you've eliminated all the sensible things that aren't the solution, then whatever's left, however improbable or unusual it is, must be the answer. So we're stuck with this situation where lab studies, where we know that we can't lose water to infiltration, show losses of pollutants being kind of processed in the filter media, do see pollution being removed. If we factor infiltration into the setup, we have too much pollution being removed, which either then has to suggest that actually that number, the P50, isn't right. But the problem is, to make this equation work, it then has to be P0. So suddenly we're saying bioretention systems do nothing, but the lab studies contradict that. So infiltration can't be it, right? So we're losing water, so the lab study model can't be it. And by the way, these papers talk about losing water on heavy clay soils, in lined systems, and so on and so forth. The answer is not that we're all built on sand and all the water disappeared, because even if that was the case, like, that's not the answer. So we've got a problem. The lab scale model doesn't work because it doesn't show the losses of water that the real world studies show. The infiltration model doesn't work because there's no way to make the mass balance work without accepting that bioretention systems do absolutely no pollution, which the lab do no pollutant removal, which the lab scale studies show they do. So the only solution that's left, there's two solutions left. Either something completely different is happening that I have no idea about, or these systems evapotranspire way more than we think. I do not know if that's true. I do not know if I'm being blindsided by something completely different, but the point is, this is a game changer for what we think about how bioretention systems work, and we need to investigate it. So ultimately, this video is an attempt at a call out to get you interested in this, and it should be interesting because the vexed problem with stormwater management has always been, look, we know that urbanisation increases stormwater volumes and peak flows and the like, and that screws up urban waterways. And we've always thought that the volumes that had to disappear, the volumes that we needed to disappear, were really, really massive. But suddenly we have some research that says bioretention systems, we don't know how they do it, but get rid of pretty substantial volumes. Suddenly we have a potential tool that might, and I really stress might, because this is only a handful of papers, but we have a potential tool that might actually get rid of substantial volumes of stormwater. That should be exciting, because it is the first inkling we've really got that we can actually manage hydrology from urban areas to not screw up urban waterways. But the problem here is, where the heck is it going? We do not understand it. These papers have changed it. And that should both interest you and hopefully excite you to go out there and encourage people to do research. If you are interested in this and have the ability to do research, I would strongly suggest that some sort of research figuring out where that water is going would be really, really, really important. Okay, that's the episode. I hope you found that useful. I hope you find this as interesting as I find it. Hit us up in the comments if you want to talk. But for now, have a good one. We'll see you soon. And now for those journal articles. There they are on the screen. Unless, of course, you're listening in audio, and for you, I shall read them out. Here we go. Hunt W. et al. 2006, evaluating bioretention, hydrology and nutrient removal at 3 field sites in North Carolina. The Journal of Irrigation and Drainage Engineering, 132-6, pages 600 to 608. Lukey T. and Nichols P. 2015, the pollution removal and stormwater reduction performance of street-side bioretention basins after 10 years in operation. Science of the Total Environment, 536, pages 784 to 792. Mackenzie McCarg A. et al. 2008, Stormwater Gardens to Improve Urban Stormwater Quality in Brisbane. Parker N. 2010, Assessing the Effectiveness of Water-Sensitive Urban Design in South East Queensland. Faculty of Built Environment and Engineering, Queensland University of Technology. Master of Engineering.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.